Hey there, it's Ashley Stahl here, counterterrorism professional turned career and business coach, and I am here for those moments when you look in the mirror and you realize it's time to make some sort of radical change or U-turn in your life so that you can stop operating on cruise control and start living your life on purpose. So join me here on the U-Turn podcast every single week where you're going to be hearing from inspiring, insightful guests, be it CEOs, spiritual leaders, love experts, or of course, yours truly, so that you can become your very best self without having to take life so seriously. And don't forget, if you head on over to uturnpodcast.com, that's YOUTURN podcast.com, you're going to get access to show notes, which have books and resources mentioned by our guests, as well as access to one of my 4 free e-courses over at uturnpodcast.com. Whether you want to land a new job you love, get clarity on the best career path for you, launch that dream business, or deepen your romantic relationships. Whew, okay, enough about me. Let's get this party started with this week's guest. This episode is brought to you by Cake Publishing, ghostwriting, publicity, and copywriting house, there to help influencers and entrepreneurs get their voice out there in a much bigger way. If you're ready to make a bigger impact, head on over to cakepublishing.com. That's CAKE publishing.com. Hey, Ash Stahl here at the U-Turn Podcast. This week we are having someone that is really near and dear to my heart on the show, Alyssa Nobriga. She's a leadership coach, but she's so much more than that. She is someone that is going to help you get so much clarity on who you are, what you want, how to feel, how to be in the world as a really centered and intentional being. Alyssa happened to be one of my first coaches ever, and in a rare turn of events, we've become friends, which is such a gift. Very rare is it that we are friends with our coaches. And so I'm really honored to have her here and inspire all of you. So let's get moving. Alyssa, I love you. Welcome.
I love you. Thank you for having me here.
It feels like a play date, but it's going to be even better. So talk to me, like what, we were talking earlier about what it looks like to go towards what you're wanting in your life. And, what that experience might be for so many people. So what are your thoughts on what happens for someone as they want to reach certain goals in their life and they start moving towards them?
Good question. I love it. I love the concept of conscious leadership so that we define what success is for ourselves. And what I find is that anytime somebody gets really clear on what their vision is and they start taking steps towards it, anything that has held them back mentally or emotionally will come up to be transformed. And so if we hustle over that, we'll just take those blocks with us, creating more work for ourselves. As we grow, so do our problems or patterns in our own brain, right? And so we just amplify everything. So part of the work that I do is to support people in being more conscious with looking at those things that have held them back and using them to help transform so that when they take strategy and steps towards what they're wanting to create, making sure that it's aligned for them, it's a lot easier to create it, right? We get out of our own way. So it's just a more conscious way of moving towards your goals. Because otherwise it's like, it's not quite aligned, or you're just taking more of the issues with you. And those things that have been blocking us, it's not bad that they come up. I actually get really excited with clients when they come up because that's the opportunity to change them, to change our relationships with them. Like, for example, the inner critic, right? Mm-hmm. Or doubt. What are some other common ones? Confidence for men.
Anxiety.
Anxiety. Yeah. All these things are like, oh, these are what are looking to be transformed. And if you have the right support or tools to work through them, not only are you going to feel better now, not just when you get the goal. So you're going to feel better now, but then you can actually be more productive and strategic with moving towards what you're wanting, having transformed those blocks.
Amazing. And what would you suggest when somebody is, they have some sort of goal? Maybe they want to get a promotion. Maybe they want to make more money, like something that they really care about, and they're moving towards it and they start to feel a wave of self-doubt. Like what would be the first step?
Great. So first identify it so that they're not identified with the block. So first see that it's a block, but know that it has nothing to do with them. So then it's not personal. It's not heavy. It's like, oh, there's that block. Because our relationship with the block makes the whole difference. So it's like, if I change my relationship with the block will change. And so first see it without identifying with it. Oh, here's self-doubt. And then find out, how is doubt trying? There's different ways to approach it. So and I think it's helpful just to kind of orient people. So if you are afraid of feeling, and if you tend to overthink things because it's an unconscious way not to feel, know that about yourself so that you can develop some more emotional mastery with just breathing through feelings, because it really only takes 90 seconds to feel something without thinking about it for it to move through. So you want to be able to develop that part of yourself. It's also going to help you in relationships. And if you happen to be one of those people that, they wallow in feelings and they don't have the mindset to see what the thoughts are, the patterns are, or they just get sucked into them, you want to start identifying what the thought patterns are that bring you into an unconscious pattern of wallowing in it, so that you don't just get sucked in. So you want to have both developed inside of you, right? So just something to orient. If you happen to not want to feel a lot of the time, then sometimes it's a practice for first noticing it's there and then breathing into the sensation in your body without telling a story about it. So if it's self-doubt, maybe in your solar plexus you feel butterflies or queasy. It's like, even just right now, as people are listening, you can just take a moment to get present with the sensation in your body. And just breathe into it, fully allowing it to be here just for 90 seconds as an experiment, just breathing into it and then letting it go without thinking about it. And ironically, you'll start to notice as you breathe into and you accept it, it dissolves. It's the exact opposite of what we would have thought. And so when we're trying to judge something, it's like an unconscious way to help us move on from it, but we're stuck with what we judge. And so the opposite is true. What we accept, what we breathe into, for those people that are afraid to feel their emotions, it's totally safe. It's just a feeling. It's just a sensation in the body, and breathe into it and then let it go and notice that you're more present and it starts dissolving. So those are for the camp that are those who don't feel a lot. Yeah.
Just breathing into it and so what about somebody who has a hard time getting in touch with their feelings? Because I've been really finding a lot of people lately telling me that I don't really know how I feel about something until way later, how do you get connected to that?
It's a muscle. I think it's like something that you practice. You just start noticing anytime you feel something, say anxious or stressed, right? At the heart of that is fear. So anytime you feel a contraction in your body, that's a cue to ask yourself, what am I thinking in that moment? Because thoughts create feelings. And so you want to start, it's something, a habit that you practice, but you can develop more internal mastery around this, which will translate to external mastery, because life is a mirror. So as you start changing these things inside, which is just starting to slow down or noticing when you feel stressed, what am I believing in that moment? And then you can question it. That's more for the people, for those who they get trapped in emotions. I just want to complete that part. So those who kind of wallow and they get trapped in emotions, start noticing anytime you feel deflated or disempowered or not confident or lack of self-worth or self-trust. That's when you want to discover what was the thought that I was thinking prior to that feeling that created that feeling. And the more you tend to that, the more you develop mastery around this muscle recognition of, oh, that thought created that. And now I can go to the root of questioning that thought. And over time, it's like working out. You end up feeling your muscle memories are a lot stronger and you don't get sucked into these dynamics that aren't actually productive, nor do they feel good.
If only my body was as fit as my mind, I'd have a 6-pack. So, I mean, I'm just listening, like, let's say somebody who's listening right now, they're feeling a bit depressed today.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through, like, okay, the person kind of realizes in their body, like, oh, I feel a bit depressed. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
What would be the first question to ask themselves to get out of the depression, not to run away from it, but to move forward from it? Exactly.
Great question. And so again, the first thing is just to notice that it's there without identifying it with it. So it's like this feeling of sadness is here, but I am not sad. It's not who I am. I think that's an important step. Oh, there's energy of sadness here. Okay. And so it's okay that sadness is here, and let's just experiment for 90 seconds. Let's just discover what happens when I actually do the exact opposite of what I would want to do, which is breathe into it, to allow it to be here, to just energetically breathe into the sensation in your body where the sadness is. And anyone can do this as they're listening. Just follow along. Find a contraction or a low energy in your body, even if it's tired. Just find where it is in your body. And without thinking about it, just breathe into the direct sensation in your body and just fully giving it infinite space to be here just for right now as an experiment. Just breathing in and letting it go. And without thinking about it, just fully allowing it. What happens? What do you notice?
It's more ease, right?
Yeah, exactly. 100% of the time.
I just muted my mic because I sounded like Darth Vader, just like breathing out so much. Yeah.
It's like all these energies just want to be accepted. They just want to be allowed. And the moment we don't identify with them, we don't tell ourselves more stories about who we are, where we think we are or we're not in our lives, and we just literally embrace them as a sensation in the body, they move on. They're like little kids. They're off playing again. It doesn't need to be hard. It doesn't need to take a long time. But in this way, as we have a practice of this, we get out of our own way. We feel more present, and we can move forward on our goals in a much more efficient and happier way.
And what do you have to say? And I was thinking a lot about the places we go to avoid our feelings.
Yeah.
What, because I mean, let's say that the person,
Cupcakes.
Yeah, you know me so well. I literally had one an hour ago. Let that whole thing go. But I mean, you know, there's so many people who are not necessarily ascending in the way that they realize they're feeling depressed today, and they question what the thought is, and they breathe into it. But there's a lot of people who are in avoidance. So I would love to hear, like, what does avoidance look like? And how do you know if maybe you're in avoidance and it's time to switch it up?
Well, I think most people, if they're really honest with themselves, they know if they're in avoidance. And if they're not honest with themselves, they're going to say they're not in avoidance, meaning if that pattern is playing out. Mm-hmm. And you can't really help somebody change unless they want to. But obviously, your listeners are here. So I just honor all of you guys for showing up to improve yourselves and to wake up to how amazing you already are and get some more life hacks and tools to live the life that feels really aligned for you. Mm-hmm. And so if you're listening, you're probably not in a lot of avoidance. But one thing I would say, I think one of the most important things to just mention about this is not to judge whatever the habits or patterns are that we see. Because as soon as we judge it, we're stuck with it. So for example, if you have a tendency to overwork as a way to run from not feeling good enough, or overeat, or serial date, there are different ways that the human psyche plays itself out. Once we realize it, and we can talk about how to realize it, but once we realize it, I think it's good to have a compassionate perspective about it, to say, oh, that's the part of me that's trying to make sure that I'm safe, that doesn't want me to fail. So I keep improving myself so that I feel good enough. Mm-hmm. So we can have a compassionate lens while we start seeing these patterns. And as we do that, we find out, well, what does it really want from me? What does avoidance want from me? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, it wants me to make sure that I am safe, that I'm protected. And you can start taking dominion over that pattern of like, oh, because obviously the avoidance isn't going to work. There's going to be some backlash where if it's around overworking, our body's going to hurt, right? Mm. Where health is going to be challenged by it. If it's emotional eating, then our weight or our, how we feel in our bodies and our health is going to be affected. So there's consequences to avoiding. Mm-hmm. And so finding out what's the payoff for avoiding? What does this pattern really want for me or for overworking? And find the positive intention behind it and say, oh, it wants to make sure that I am safe, that I'm taking care of myself financially, that I am accepted in the world, whatever that intention is for you. Then you can discover what's a new way that I can honor that intention without using avoidance. Mm. So it's like, okay, if I want to make sure that I'm financially taken care of, and one way that I've known to do that is to overwork. Well, let me just get more conscious about it. What's the number I want to create? Okay. I want to make $100,000 this year, and look at the ways that you've been doing it and things that are working and aren't working, and be able to come up with a clear strategy so you're engaged, but you're not burnt out. Right. And you can take dominion over the parts of you that think that more money is working hard when that's not necessarily the case. And so when you start working hard, you can take a moment to just a beat to say, oh, this is when you reprogram or you rewire. You say, I'm actually going to try it this way now. And you acknowledge that part of you that's only known how to do it through burning yourself out. So it's like, oh, thank you. You're the part of me that wants to make sure I'm taken care of, and I'm trying this way now. So give yourself a week, a day, an hour to experiment with something new, and then just find out what's more effective.
I love this. And I know that this all relates to leadership, right? Like having an intentional life, feeling like you're leading.
Yeah.
And I know leadership means something different to everyone, but when you're coaching, what does leadership mean for you?
For me, and what I'm most interested in supporting, because I feel like we're outside of the hierarchical models in this day and age. Nobody's looking for a guru or somebody to tell them what to do. We all know. And if we have the right questions, we can really hear our own wisdom around it.
Yes.
And so I'm more interested in empowering and supporting people in unlocking their own wisdom, because you have your answers lined up for you better than anyone else. And a lot of the times we've looked outside of ourselves to government or to our parents or authorities for the answer when really we know. And I'm most interested in people waking up to their wisdom while having the support to hear it in the right questions and guidance to hear that. So for me, I'm more interested in having the things that take the fear off the line of this, that create the static, so that you can hear your wisdom more clearly. And it's going to look different for everyone. So, and the way I guess I would define success is really loving what you do. This is Maya Angelou's quote, whom I love: loving what you do and loving how you do it.
Okay.
And so for me, for me, what happened was I ended up taking my business last year online, and it did really well and financially, but I wasn't as fulfilled because wasn't really expressing all of my core values. So one of the ways that I like to, it's like, we don't have a career for 50 years anymore. That's not how we navigate things. We have lots of different choices in our careers. And I think if you have a North Star and you have your clear top five values, you can make decisions in alignment with that so that you feel fulfilled as you keep making decisions and moving forward in your life. So, for example, my top five values are connection, growth, truth, service, and love. And so I make sure that I align all areas of my life with my values. So for example, I set up my business last year around growing it in a new way, which was online, but I didn't feel as much connection in person or live. And so I wasn't as fulfilled. So I started doing a hybrid. Now I do in-person things as well as online. And for group fitness, I'll do group activities where I do group classes because it's more fulfilling. It's more in alignment with my values, right? So I think helping people identify what their top five values are and how they can align their life so that they express those values in all areas with their health, their relationships, their investments, can be the ingredients for a more fulfilled and happier life.
And I mean, as it relates to figuring out what your core values are, I know so many people have a knowing when they look at a sheet of paper and see a bunch of values listed, but there are also so many people who I think struggle to figure out who they are, yes. and they look at this list and it's kind of just like, oh, looks like scrambled eggs,
Yeah. So
I think how do you do that?
This is such a great topic. I know, I get it. It's like, well, how do you know if you don't know? So
yeah,
I think we can get overwhelmed when we don't have clarity in our lives. I definitely don't think you should look outside of yourself to try to get the clarity. I think it just creates more overwhelm. And sometimes it's okay to be inspired, but oftentimes it creates overwhelm. So what I would encourage anyone in that position to do is to actually do a detox of looking outside and start to just tune in. So it's like we already have things in our life that light us up. And if we start paying attention to them, we'll start seeing the themes. So what I did in how I started discovering what my top five values were and finding clarity was I just started creating a journal where I would write the moment that I had the most joy that day. called it a joy journal. So I would just write down, here's something that really lit me up. And then I would find the themes. So at the time, I think I was living in Bali, and I realized I loved bringing people to Bali. I think it's an amazing place. I loved consciousness work. I loved bringing people together. I loved raw food and scooter ride. Like I just started noticing the things that I loved. And at first, you're going to have a big list, but you're going to start refining it to maybe first 8, and then you'll get down to 5. So for a while, it was, I love people. I love nature. I love connection within myself. And then I realized, okay, if I just qualify that as connection, that takes the umbrella into that quality. And I tested it out. It's like a jacket. You wear it for a few days and you're like, okay, these are my top 5 values. And then from there, you can choose a career that is in alignment with those values, or you can change your career now so that you express those values more consciously. So if you don't have a lot of connection in your career, how can you cultivate that and create that now? Whether you change careers or you just start doing that in the current career that you're at, you'll not only have more fun in it, but it'll help you be more of an alignment towards, or at least enjoy the time until you transfer to the next job. So
I love that. And
start just paying attention.
Yeah, paying attention, which I think a lot of people struggle with. Like how, you know what I mean? Like it's a noisy mind that we often hang out in. So what are some suggestions you have to make some space so that you can start paying better attention to yourself?
I like a nightly journal. I really do. I think taking time to unplug from online, because it can get really overwhelming just looking out, that process of looking. I think at least have 50% looking in, where you have a practice of reflection, where you're really navigating your life in a way that feels true for you, not just going through the motions or not paying attention to what lights you up, what you really value. I think your time is worthy of you. And rather than scrolling through Instagram at night, it's like, can you write for a minimum of 5 minutes and start noticing what lights me up? What am I really called to do in the world? And what feels like a deep yes for me? Or what are those wisdom nuggets that you would have overlooked if you hadn't have taken the time just to write down and reflect? Just a simple 5 minutes a day can start making a big difference.
And I think that also, as I'm thinking about this, there's so many people who I think society there's a certain mindset, especially in the United States, of the 40-hour work week or the kind of job you should have. I know that when I was a kid, I was told that my options were like veterinarian, teacher, lawyer, And obviously, Get to Twerk podcast was definitely on the list of options I was told. But my question, I think, with this is, I think so many people are not necessarily uniquely designed to participate in society in the way that is typically heard. Like, for me, I know that I'm not meant for the 40-hour work week, not because I'm entitled and I don't want to work. There's no story I have there, but because like when I don't have space in my life, I lose my creativity. Like it's just not as there, and I'm not as happy, I notice. So what ways can people start to think about their life or question the norms that they're buying into? Or what are some ways that people can shift the way they're thinking to step into more leadership, being more of who they truly are?
Yeah, these are such good questions. I think having time and space to ask the bigger questions, so you don't get out of alignment and just go with the flow of what everyone else is doing, so that you can really define what your values are, what success is for you. Then you don't let life do it for you unconsciously. I think community is also so having space to reflect and really tune into yourself. Number one, community is a big thing. Having people around you that call you forward, that inspire you into what's possible, I think is one of the greatest ways to create change, and really questioning the assumptions that you live out of. I have a practice, like it's a non-negotiable, at least 1 hour a week, of just questioning the beliefs I live out of. And I think starting with the stressful beliefs is helpful for people. But if you want to go even deeper, you can question everything. And there's a great level of freedom in that when we get over the freak out of how we've seen everything in the world and control and all that. But there's the real level of creativity, and that's where the inspiration kicks in, and we can get downloads for what we're not seeing right now that maybe in the next 5 years is an opportunity, right? You didn't have this podcast when you were younger, right? As an option. So it's like there's something in you that is intelligent, that's deeper than what your mind knows. And if you create space to listen to that, you will be guided, and you can like doors open up in ways that we couldn't have planned for. That's been my experience, at least. And the more I listen to that voice, the better things line up. And I definitely think helping people choose careers that feed their energy. I'm sure you've talked about zone of genius, where you overlap what you love and what you're good at, because the things that give you energy, you're uniquely qualified to share in the world. And that inspiration, that creativity gifts everyone you're around, gives you energy, and you are in that zone, that creative zone. And so you, Ashley, are such an example of play and creativity and a powerful businesswoman. I love that you're doing this. And it's like, you're uniquely qualified to do certain things that other people aren't, and me as well. And if we can listen to that, we end up gifting everyone around us with those unique attributes and qualities. But we first have to tune in. We have to know what those are within us. I think having a community is powerful to call us forward, and having a practice of really questioning the limiting beliefs that come up along the way. Those would be 3 really powerful takeaways for people to start integrating, or at least trying on, to see if that supports them. Other people are going to want to make sure that they, listen to podcasts and or work out, and all those things can be great, but keep it simple for yourself. Whatever kind of practice you do, keep it simple, and then stay consistent with it and really try it out and see what actually helps you unlock your magic.
Gosh. Well, shucks, Alyssa. Thanks for all of the compliments.
I adore you.
I receive them. I'm also curious, I think that especially you and I, we're entrepreneurial, creative spirits. I think a lot of people have a creative spirit inside of them, of course. And one belief that I hear quite often, or belief system that I notice a lot, especially in one-on-one coaching, is people who have questions around what qualifications mean. Like, am I qualified? Can I have this? And I would love some of your thoughts on imposter syndrome and how to release that so that we can move even more into leadership. And I know you talked a little bit about getting intimate with it, seeing what this part of you says. Are there other tools that you have in mind, or books that people can read that you love to step into more leadership?
Great question. So in terms of the imposter syndrome, it's almost like it's a self-image. So there's an image that we have about who we think we are and who we think we're not. And it may match what how the world sees us, or it may not. But you've stepped into a position in your life where you are deeming yourself not qualified. And it's just a story. It's based on an image, and image is not real. And so the more you can question that, the more you can step into what is true. And we could go deep, and I think I'll save that for another talk, what we do around self-image and the truth of who you are.
You don't want to do a 7-hour podcast on image?
But I mean, it's a deep process of like waking up out of the belief systems of who we think we are, because those change over our lives. And so, this whole idea of being qualified, we've been conditioned, a lot of us, at least in the West, have been conditioned into, you have to do these steps and then you're qualified. And even the people I remember when I got my license, I was driving, I thought, oh my God, they just gave me a license. This is who's driving in the world. That was so easy. And so same, it's like, oh, when I became a therapist, it was like, oh, that's what it takes to be a therapist. All this other training didn't. And, or like, that's what it took to become a doctor. You can go both ways of like, oh shoot, who's running this world?
Yeah. That's how I felt in the Pentagon. It was like, whoa, what are we doing here?
Yeah. Right. And it's like, if we don't, and that's like another conversation, but if we don't align with or really embody and step into the positions that we're in our lives, who will? And the more conscious we can do that with doing, and I'm big into leadership with yourself first, and then inspiring others too. Because when we're told what to do, how often is that inspiring, versus when we see somebody living in their fullness and their potential and they're rocking it and they're with an open heart, we're inspired. And so first leading ourselves, being an example, but working with the limiting beliefs about, our low self-worth, there's low self-confidence of like, who am I to do this? I can't, or feeling like I'm the only woman in this position, am I qualified? Or if I'm the youngest person in this position, am I qualified? All those are just insecure thinking. It has nothing to do with who you are. It's just a pattern of thought, and you can feed those thoughts or you can question them. It's that simple. I love Byron Katie's work. You know me. She has a website called thework.com, and she's got free resources for people to do mindset work. I think it's one of the cleanest, if not the cleanest way to do mindset work. And to me, that is then self-leadership. You have the answers when the fear and the contractions aren't there. And that's what the work does. It helps you let go of the fear so that you can powerfully show up in a conscious way, doing the work that you are inspired and called to do. And that changes the world. But it starts with us. And so, the imposter syndrome is they're just beliefs. They have nothing to do with who you are. And it's like the more you can use that to help you wake up to who you are beyond any belief system about being good or bad or worthy or not worthy, you discover a deeper freedom. And in that, that's to me one of my core values. So it's a worthy investigation is what I would say, and try it out.
I'm like realizing the questions I'm asking you. Thank God nobody's asking me them, because you're really answering some big questions as I'm listening. And I still have to go back, even though we could talk for a billion hours about this, of the ego's desire to self-identify an image. Like, what can you share? Because I think that this is the crux of everything we're talking about. So, and a lot of people don't know about this. So what are your thoughts on identity and how people like to identify? Like, I've had so many coaching clients, like one client is like the CEO of a hospital, and it's very much like she identifies as the CEO of the hospital who went to Harvard. A lot of us identify with our LinkedIn profile, our resume, how people see us. So how do people get beyond that? Because I think even though a lot of people rest on that and they love their juicy little elevator pitch that they share at cocktail parties, a lot of people I think are tired of themselves. They're tired of keeping this up. So what are your thoughts on how to break past that, how to question that, how to notice that? Anything.
Yeah. Honesty, just being really honest and true with ourselves. And I think there is a point where it's like, oh, this is an old story I've been telling myself, because even if we think we have a good self-image, right? We've got a good identity. There's going to be positions that we're in or circles that we're in where that identity isn't that fun to wear, right? There's going to be people that do stuff that's better than us. And so as soon as you identify with being good, the pendulum has to swing and we're bad in another situation. And any identity is too limiting for the truth of who you are. It's too limiting because we are bigger than any identity. And so for me, when I question, one simple thing that people can do is they can write down, I am ... and then write down the different identities. I am a daughter. I am an executive. I am not good enough. Because sometimes we're going to feel good enough and sometimes we're not going to feel good enough, which is ironic and should be a wake-up call in and of itself, right? Because who we are is constant. But the stories change. Like when we're younger, it's like, I am what my car is. I am who I marry. I am what my job is. I am the mom. And these identities change, but there's something that doesn't change. And to me, that something is a deeper level of freedom. And it's actually the experience of what we think the identity will give us. But it's already here because the ego is trying to sell us something in the future that we already are. And so we just write down these stories. They're so innocent. It's so sweet. It's so cute that it's like, I'm this, and this. And one of my spiritual teachers talked about the ego as if there was a play happening and you were in the audience and the play just happened and all the audience started applauding. And then you in the audience ran up on stage and took the bow and took the whole credit for everything. And it's so innocent. It just wants to be seen and acknowledged and feel special. And it is, but it's not any more or less than anyone else. And again, just having a compassionate presence to these patterns of thinking or patterns of identifying ourselves as X, Y, and Z or not X, Y, and Z, I think is helpful because it's more aligned with our true nature, which is compassionate, which is loving, but it's unconditional. And so bringing love to those parts of us or to those misunderstandings is really powerful, but just literally writing down I am, and then I am X, Y, and Z, and going through questioning each belief. Can I know for sure that this is who I am? Can I know without a shadow of a doubt? And then if so, where's my proof? And really starting to take a magnifying glass into the unconscious assumptions that we've bought into about who we are. Because it's like, I remember being a kid and thinking, wow, we are so gullible. We've just believed what everybody else has told us to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And there comes a point where we take our power back and we start really investigating what our truth is. And that is an exciting moment, because in that, any moment, like life is like an Etch-a-Sketch, any moment we can just swipe and it's clean, it's fresh, and none of that exists other than what's in our mind.
Wow. And I'm also thinking about truth. Like so many people, there's so many levels of truth, and it's so hard to figure out what's true.
Well, let's do an experiment real quick.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so everybody stop thinking for 2 seconds. 1, 2. So in those 2 seconds, whatever wasn't being maintained by the mind isn't true.
One more time, say that again. Whatever wasn't being
maintained by the mind. If you had to make it up, if you had to tell yourself its existence in your mind, it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple.
Yeah, it reminds me of like an old lady who I knew who somebody was talking about in a seminar how she said she was depressed and she just didn't want to live anymore. And she was like, I'm 95. I just need to go. And one morning she woke up and the guy asked her, he said, is there any time where you don't feel like you want to die? And she said, yeah, first thing in the morning. And he was like, why? And she's like, well, because I forgot I'm depressed.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like we kind of remember, sometimes I think that's what presence does, right? Like there's so many moments where people might notice like, man, I felt so good in that moment. And it's like, well, if we really take a look at why you felt so good in that moment, maybe it's because you just forgot the whole story you've been telling yourself about what doesn't feel good.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's hard when we're caught in those stories we may see it, but we don't really know how to get out of it. And so just writing down all those stories that created my stress or my depression or anxiety, and then looking at that from a distance, it's like, oh, no wonder I'm feeling this way. I'm believing all these things.
Yeah.
And just having compassion, and then having a process like the work or doing some work with a coach or somebody to help you move through those misunderstandings. It's like instant freedom.
Yeah. God, this podcast episode is for me today. I'm like, okay, noted. Thank you. And, I think a lot of people, I assume that part of the reason that they don't want to change is because there's loss, with change. There's loss with, like, sometimes, right? Like,
yeah.
There's beliefs about loss, at least. Yeah. Like, you perceive that if you become more you're going to lose friends. You might lose your job or, people won't like you. So how do you move through the grief of change? Because sometimes if you really grow, your friends don't make sense for you anymore, or, all of these different things.
Yeah, I think I've talked a lot about like questioning your beliefs. So obviously if you question the fear-based stories, it'll be easier to do that. But it's like experiment then. Be willing to test something out, and it can be small, so that you don't have this big, huge Band-Aid rip. Some people like to go all in and they're intense and go for it. But if not, then it's like, can I speak my truth 10% more today and see what happens?
I love that.
Can I be a little bit more compassionate with myself when people don't accept me, and know that those who I am growing, that the woman I'm growing into there are other women that will support me as I am. And as I support myself, I don't need it from them so much, and I won't take anything less than what I'm offering myself. And therefore I'll align with women who do see me and celebrate me and support me, or a partner. So it's like we start showing up for ourselves the way that we want the world to. And we take the world off of the expectation that they should give us something, approval, praise, love, validation. We give that to the part of us that is innocently looking for it from the world. And ironically, we don't need it so much from them. And it's easier then to align with people that are mirroring to us how we feel about ourselves and what is our truth now as we grow and evolve. Mm-hmm. But there is something, just to mention, sometimes there's something called a competing intention, where if we've really been trying to make efforts to make a change in our lives, say we've hit a plateau in our income, and we're really hustling and trying our hardest and working with a coach or something, and we're not able to create that change, sometimes what I find is that there's a competing intention, meaning we've got one desire that's opposing another desire.
Love that.
And so it's like, I want to make more money, but I've got this fear around it and it's unconscious. And so one thing you can do is you can ask yourself, if you're in this situation where you haven't been able to make change on something, you've really been giving your all to it, ask yourself, one fear I have about having what I want is, and then listen. And your mind's going to be like, well, I don't fear making more money. Of course I want that. But it's like, well, if I make more money, I fear, and then listen, see what comes up. Because I've done this with lots of people, but one woman realized that she was afraid if she made more money, she was afraid that she was going to make more than her husband, and then she wouldn't be in a marriage anymore, because the point that her mom made more money is when her parents got a divorce.
Wow.
And so she unconsciously associated making more money means divorce.
Wow. That's a huge, huge breakthrough. And I think a lot of people sometimes, if you give them an invitation like that, like if I make more money, I fear, most people are going to go straight into their heads and not even just spit out an answer. So what would be a suggestion you think for somebody to just get straight to the truth quicker?
Yeah. Well, just listen for 5 seconds.
Don't even overthink what comes through.
Don't overthink. Yeah. And you could also just write for 2 minutes without picking up the pen. Write 2 minutes. What I fear about having more money is, and then write for 2 minutes, just stream of consciousness. Don't pick it up. Don't think too much about it. And then after 2 minutes, circle the ones that surprised you. And then you'll start bringing more mindfulness to these unconscious blocks, and you'll be able to take dominion over it. And it'll be easier for you then to break through that next income level.
So beautiful. And, when it comes to, really getting clarity on what you want to do, you suggested journaling what lights you up. You suggested core values, which is something that I love, both of those. Are there any other suggestions that you have for people in their career right now who are feeling disconnected from purpose, but they really want something and they kind of feel like they're drawing up a blank?
Yeah.
Where do they start?
To me, purpose really is living in alignment with your values in all areas of your life, right? So I challenge people when they say that they don't know what they want. I challenge them, because I do think we know what we want. We may have a misunderstanding that it's possible for us to be successful with it, or we may have some other fear that's clouding us feeling that we can carry it out and do it in the ways that we really want to. But question the fears first. Like, if you really did know what you want, what would that be? And just challenge yourself to get really honest, not just to believe that they don't know. And so challenge yourself to get really honest. Okay, I do know what I want. What is that? And then identify what that is. And then the next thing I would do is identify what the fear is, so you can question that and not create a barrier for yourself before you even begin. So start questioning those fears. But the other thing I would say is, once you've identified what you want, what do you imagine it will give you? So it's like, okay, if I make more money and I'm with the ideal partner and I've got, X, Y, and Z, what's the goal underneath the goal? What's the deeper goal? It's like, okay, then I would feel secure. Then I would feel safe. What is it for you? What is the deeper intention for why you want those things? And once you identify what those qualities are, start embodying and expressing them in your life now, so that you don't get so caught on the physical thing giving it to you, but you start inhabiting that security or creating that sense of security within yourself. So maybe you secure the insecure part of yourself as a way to do that, like as a practice. And then you actually have what you think the goal will give you. And you're not so attached or controlling around the goal giving it to you. Ironically, it helps you be more bold and more confident in stepping forward to create it, and not disillusioned thinking that the future will give you something that you don't already have.
All the tricks we play on ourselves, unbelievable.
I mean, it can get tricky.
Yeah, it's like the Olympics in our heads. And I'm just curious, what are you loving right now? Because I don't know if I mentioned to you, did I tell you I started Kundalini yoga a little bit?
I want to go with you. I love Kundalini yoga.
I am so feeling it, and it is so opening up my world. Because first of all, the word yoga scares me away. So it's really true, because I just picture myself darting my eyes around the room and having to stretch, and I'm like, that feels like a punishment. But Kundalini yoga. So some psychic told me, you got to do Kundalini yoga. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm going to try it. So I brought my mat and realized it's just like a meditation chanting class. And I was like, oh, I don't even need a mat. I don't need to stretch this. This I can do. So it's been really, really helping. And I feel like you're so tapped in, Alyssa, to yourself and that's just one of the best gifts of being friends with you and having you in my life and having been coached by you in so many ways. I'm curious, like, what are you loving right now? Is there a resource? Is there a book? Is there a class?
Yeah.
Something actionable that you really want to impart or share?
I'll just share what's really inspiring me, and I'm going to call myself out in public so that I really commit to this, because I've been feeling the woods for a while. I love redwoods, and I have not gotten out into the redwoods, and I have got some space on my calendar to be creative, to give myself that space. So I'm committing within this next 30 days, for sure, I'm thinking 2 weeks, that I'm going to be out in the redwoods just to give myself my own retreat. That would be really nourishing for me on so many levels. But in terms of one of the things that I've been really enjoying is acupuncture. I'm on this health hack right now I've never really prioritized my health, but I'm loving acupuncture.
How interesting. And tell me more.
It's like they do this little needle point on my third eye, and I feel like it's like a state of oneness, and I travel, and my body feels like it's elevating, and I kind of sleep, but I kind of don't. And I feel really rejuvenated. It's fantastic. So big plug for acupuncture, which is, I'm not normally into health and all that, which is probably why I'm getting into it now. But, and then Byron Katie's work. Those are the three things that I am deepening in more and more. So questioning my thoughts, being in redwoods, being in the woods, and acupuncture.
Being pricked by a few needles. I can give you it for free, Alyssa. Just come over.
I'm so curious how it would end up after that.
It would just look like literally like a war zone, just blood everywhere.
I'm sure I'd feel great.
I would just tattoo my name on your back with the needles like a creep.
I'd get all this like henna tattoo.
Yes, just my Ashley on your back with little pricks. Oh my God, I love you. I could just talk to you for so long. So Jake Abraham always encourages me to ask this, and I've been asking a lot of people, what have I not asked you that you think would just be so great for me to ask you and serve other people here?
I would just encourage your listeners to get really honest with themselves and ask themselves what's most important to them, and to ask themselves why they're not prioritizing it. And if they are, to celebrate themselves, because twofold, I think it's important to be really honest with ourselves, to have time to just check in. And as I'm calling you out, I haven't been in the redwoods. I'm now committed to that. And the other thing that's really important, and I'm really lit up right now, especially in the leadership program that I'm doing with women, is to celebrate ourselves. It's like we can have all this list of things where we're not in our life and things that we can improve. But I think it's, if not more important, to also acknowledge where we are and all that we do to show up for ourselves and for each other. And I think that growth doesn't have to be hard. It can be super inspiring and fun, and rather like being compassionate with our own inner criticism, but also then cultivating a consciousness of acknowledging ourselves. And as we do that, we acknowledge each other, and that inspires change.
And this also makes me think a lot, Alyssa, as we're talking about how different practices, be it acupuncture, be it my Kundalini yoga class, it's like when somebody kind of branches out of their comfort zone, they're, like you talked about earlier, there's a lot of resistance. And sometimes I'm sitting in my Kundalini yoga class chanting, crying for there's gotta be a reason. I don't know. And I'm like, okay, either I'm totally losing my shit or I'm finding it. I don't know. But here I am.
Let it happen. Let it happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful that we're here together, and I would love for you to share, like, where can people find you?
Yeah, they can go to alyssanobriga.com, and I do different events online for free, and I'm starting to do more in person. I'm in LA, but I'm going to do them around the world. So would love to just support any of your listeners in any way that I can.
Thank you so much. I love you.
I love you so much.
Hey there, it's Ash here, and as always, I'm reflecting on this most recent episode with Alyssa Nobriga, who is such a sacred friend to me, and a mentor, and a teacher, and a student, and all of the magical things that happen when you find deep relationships in your life. And One of the things that I love the most about her work is that she focuses on the somatic experience of pain. And what I mean by that is that quite often we feel pain in our bodies and we go instantly into a story in our head about labeling that pain as what it might be. So for example, I remember when I gave my TEDx talk at Berkeley years and years ago, I was going on stage after Guy Kawasaki, which I don't know if you know who he is, but he is a total badass man with a lot of incredible achievements and investments and really well known as a speaker. And I, on the other hand, I had never spoken to a crowd before. I had come straight out of my counterterrorism career. And, the extent of my public speaking efforts was pretty much me standing in front of a bunch of military officials reading the results of intelligence reports that I had come up with. There was no standard or bar for inspiration. And I'll never forget going backstage at the TED Talk and realizing that I was so nervous and looking around and realizing that everybody else was nervous. And one of the mind shifts that I started to come up with was that instead of calling my nerves nervousness, what I would do is I would realize I just have a lot of energy moving through me. And that's something that I think Alyssa would stand by, is that more often than not, we have some sort of somatic experience going on into our bodies and we label it versus allowing ourselves to just identify it as energy moving through us. So I remember standing on the side of the stage at the TEDx event with 4,000 people in the audience, never had spoken ever in my life, and sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not going to title what I'm feeling in my body right now as anything, because then I'm going to go into even more of a story about what this is and get myself tripped up. I'm just going to acknowledge right now that I have a lot of energy moving through me. And one thing that Alyssa has advised is that when you feel that, to breathe into it without giving it a name, without identifying or going into a story about what it is. So I remember sitting on the side of the stage at my TED Talk, holding my heart with my hand, putting my hand over my heart more accurately, and breathing in and out into the sensation that I had on me. And just like that, it went away and it lifted. And I think so often we spend so much time emoting and going into a mental story about what we're experiencing that we create more drama for ourselves through it. And it's not about denying what's present. It's more about withdrawing from the need to exacerbate it and make it more than it really is. So that's the first thing I wanted to just talk about was, how you relate to when energy hits your body. Maybe you want to call it sadness. Maybe you want to call it pain. Maybe you want to call it loss, like whatever it is on your body. Instead of labeling it, I just want to invite you now, next time you're feeling something in your body, put your hand over your heart and breathe into it without making it wrong, without making a story about what it is. The second thing I wanted to talk about from this interview, and it's so funny because before I turned on my audio to talk to you, I was like, what am I going to talk about? This was so complete. But I always find more to talk to you about is journaling. There's so many different layers of journaling. I know Ben Hardy over, in one of our other podcast episodes talks about journaling a lot. It's one of his power tools. But there's a lot of different ways to harness a journal. So I'm not really big on yoga. I'm not really big on journals, but I use them to my best of my abilities that I think serves me. And here's a couple different ways you can consider journaling. The first way is just to release emotions, free-form writing. So let's say that you've got a lot of energy moving through you, and instead of labeling it, you're breathing into it. Another great way to use that is to just release whatever it is on paper, just to write aimlessly in a subconscious stream of thought. Usually after about 10 minutes, if you're writing free form from an aspect of you, maybe you feel anger is present or whatever it is. If you write from that aspect of you, after about 10 minutes, usually subconscious material or unconscious material comes up and you start to see thoughts on the page that you didn't even know you had. So that's really powerful as a form of release. Secondly is a joy journal. So if you're struggling to figure out your purpose in the workforce or even just not feeling connected to anything, a really great way to use a journal, and you don't even need a journal. You can use your iPhone or, whatever your smartphone is in your note-taking app. And you can just write one thing that lit you up every day for 30 days, and you're undoubtedly going to find a bunch of trends. And I know that this is something that Alyssa has brilliantly touched upon. Another thing that a lot of people use journaling for is gratitude. They will write something that they're grateful for every day. What I personally use journals for is to write down the beliefs that I'm having in any given moment. So if I feel like I'm in pain in some way, And I don't want to breathe into it and not label it like the exercise I just suggested, but I'd rather name it. I will pull out a journal and write the beliefs that my pain has or whatever it is that I'm feeling. And, that's really served me well to see what it's believing about the world. And then a real power tool that I've moved into with this, and I learned this through my master's in spiritual psychology, is to compassionately forgive yourself for a limiting or irrational. A lot of the times our beliefs are irrational. Forgive yourself for those beliefs. So the way that I do it is, if I feel pain present, I'll write down what the pain is believing about a situation or an event. And I will look at it and I will read it and say, I forgive myself for buying into the misbelief that, and I'll read the belief. And I'll say the truth is that, and I switch it. So, for example, I remember at the Pentagon, my first meeting ever, I was a wreck. I was so nervous because there's a culture, and hopefully it's not still the case, where if you don't have military experience, you're not taken as legit, and even though I had a master's and spoke 3 languages and all of these things, I wasn't taken as seriously. So I remember walking into my first meeting and I had to run out the door and I literally vomed in the bathroom. I was so anxious, or whatever you want to call it, whatever that energy was moving through me. And I came, and that's where I coined my favorite term, #throw up and show up, which totally isn't the vibe I'm going for, but I think it's a funny rhyme. And so I totally threw up and showed up. And so I walked into my meeting, and I remember realizing that I had a belief that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough to be here. I wasn't good enough to be in a management role. I wasn't good enough to be making 6 figures at 23. I wasn't good enough. And there's all these other Harvard degrees or all these other degrees that should be in the room. And there I was. And I remember looking back on that moment, I could have written down these beliefs the part of me that thought I wasn't good enough was thinking. And I could have gone directly into compassionate self-forgiveness, that power tool from my master's program, of saying, I forgive myself for buying into the misbelief that I'm not good enough. The truth is, my worthiness has nothing to do with this job. This might be the job for me, it might not, but how good I am as a person and what I'm capable of, it is completely separate from the job that I'm doing here. I'm not my results. The truth is, I am not my results. So you can use this power tool at work. If you ever feel your peace is disturbed in some way, you can figure out what aspect of you is present, write down what it's believing, and feel free to go directly into compassionate self-forgiveness, forgiving yourself for the misbelief and updating it with something that in your soul is much closer to the truth. So I could go on and on forever about this work, and God bless the writers over at my PR firm, Cake Publishing, a ghostwriting house that I run. A couple of them had some misbeliefs just this week about if their writing is great or not, and I told them, let's just go into compassionate self-forgiveness and forgive yourself for the belief your writing isn't good, and let's update it with the truth. So this is translating not just in my career and my leadership as a manager, as a business owner, but it's also translating into my soul and who I am and how I process grief, whether I'm going through heartbreak, whether I'm going through loss, whether I'm going through failure, perceived failure, whatever it is. So with that said, I'm signing off, sending you lots of love, and so excited for you to put these tools to use. And I'll talk to you on the next episode. Thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of the U-Turn Podcast. You can find all of the resources that our guest mentioned on our show notes at uturnpodcast.com. That's YOUTURN podcast.com. Also, don't forget, on the website, we've got our 4 free e-courses, whether you want to land a new job you love, get clarity on the best career path for you, launch your dream business, or deepen your romantic relationships. I'll talk to you soon. Can't wait to connect on next week's episode.